Turn on the news right now, and all you see is kinetic chaos in the Middle East. You see the headlines about the US, Israel, and Iran. You see the carrier strike groups moving into position. But what the media isn't telling you, what they never tell you, is how this geopolitical chessboard is about to directly empty your bank account. Because we have been here before. Exactly 53 years ago, a remarkably similar conflict in the exact same region triggered the worst economic nightmare of the modern era. It quadrupled the price of gas overnight. It crashed the stock market by almost 50%. And it completely destroyed the purchasing power of the American middle class for an entire decade. It was called the 1973 oil shock. And the exact same dominoes are falling right now in 2026. If you think inflation over the last few years was bad, you have absolutely no idea what happens to a modern economy when the global energy supply chain actually snaps. Today, we are going to open the history books. We are going to look at exactly how the 1973 crisis broke the financial system, the brutal government traps that wiped out average families, and the specific energy arbitrage hustles that smart money used to survive the 1970s. Most importantly, I am going to show you how to use those exact same historical cheat codes to front-run the coming crisis to D, before the masses even realize what hit them. To understand the financial bloodbath that is setting up for 2026, you have to look at the anatomy of 1973. In October of that year, the Yom Kippur War broke out. The US provided military and financial support to Israel. In retaliation, the Arab nations of OPEC decided to weaponize their greatest asset. They instituted a total oil embargo against the United States and its allies. They didn't drop bombs on America, they just turned off the tap. The result was instant economic paralysis. The price of a barrel of oil shot from $3 to $12 almost overnight. That is a 300% increase. But the real disaster wasn't just the embargo. It was how the government reacted to it. President Richard Nixon panicked. He thought he could outsmart the free market, so he instituted strict price controls. He made it illegal for gas stations to raise the price of fuel beyond a certain limit. Politicians told the public they were protecting the consumer, but anyone who understands basic economics knows what happens next. Because the global price of oil was high, but the domestic price at the pump was legally capped, oil companies simply stopped selling gas to America. It wasn't profitable. This government meddling created massive artificial shortages. This is what caused the infamous gas lines. People were waiting 5, 6, 7 hours just to get a few gallons. The government had to institute odd-even rationing. You could only buy gas on certain days based on the last digit of your license plate. Fistfights and shootouts literally broke out at the pumps over a gallon of unleaded. The middle class was completely blindsided because they thought the war was happening thousands of miles away. They didn't realize that in a global economy, a geopolitical conflict is a direct, unavoidable tax on your wallet. But the pain didn't stop at the gas station, and this is the part you need to pay attention to for 2026. Oil is the blood of the economy. When the price of energy quadruples, the price of everything quadruples. People think of crude oil just as gasoline. But oil is the base ingredient for the modern world. It is the asphalt on the roads. It is the plastic in your appliances. Most importantly, petroleum is the base of modern synthetic fertilizers. When oil prices spiked, the cost to grow food skyrocketed. The cost for a trucking company to deliver that food to the grocery store doubled. This triggered an economic disease that Keynesian economists didn't even think was mathematically possible. They called it stagflation. Normally, inflation happens when the economy is booming and people are spending too much money. In the 1970s, the economy was stagnant. Unemployment was shooting through the roof, businesses were going bankrupt, and prices were still doubling. It was the worst of both worlds. You were losing your job, and the cost to feed your family was still going up every single week. So how did the smart money survive the 1970s? They didn't rely on the government. They executed the efficiency arbitrage. When the 1973 shock hit, the average American was driving a massive V8 Detroit muscle car, a heavy steel boat that got maybe 8 to 10 miles to the gallon. When gas became scarce and insanely expensive, these status symbols became toxic liabilities. People were literally abandoning their gas guzzlers at dealerships because they couldn't afford to fill the tanks. The financial winners of the 1970s didn't panic. They saw the macroeconomic shift and capitalized on it. They executed a massive wealth transfer. They looked at the Japanese auto market. Brands like Honda and Datsun, which became Nissan, were making these ugly, underpowered, lightweight cars that got 30 miles to the gallon. Before 1973, Americans laughed at them. The smart money bought them. They realized that in a resource-scarce environment, efficiency is the ultimate luxury. Within 2 years, those efficient little Japanese imports were the most valuable, highly sought-after assets on the road, while Detroit scrambled to avoid bankruptcy. But the hustle went deeper than cars. The winners shifted their wealth completely out of paper fiat currency. During stagflation, holding cash was financial suicide. The government was inflating the currency to pay for their debts. So, smart investors moved into hard physical commodities. Gold went from $35 an ounce to over $800 by the end of the decade. People bought productive farmland. They hyper-insulated their homes to drop their heating bills to zero. They invested in things that required less energy from the system to maintain. They made themselves immune to the shock. Now, look at 2026. Look at the board right now. We are watching the exact same geopolitical fault lines fracture. A massive kinetic conflict involving the US, Israel, and Iran directly threatens the Strait of Hormuz. If you don't know what the Strait of Hormuz is, you need to pull up a map. It is a narrow, 39-mile wide waterway between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Roughly 20% of the world's global oil consumption passes through that specific choke point every single day. If that strait is closed by naval mines, drone strikes, or blockades, or if regional energy infrastructure is targeted, the global supply shock will make 1973 look like a minor inconvenience. But here's the terrifying difference. In 1973, America still had a massive domestic manufacturing base. We made our own steel. We made our own consumer goods. We could absorb some of the shock locally. In 2026, our economy is entirely dependent on globalized hyper-fragile supply chains built on just-in-time inventory. We don't just import oil, we import the microchips, the pharmaceuticals, the car parts, and the electronics. Everything you buy spends weeks on a massive container ship burning diesel. When the cost of maritime shipping fuel doubles this year due to a Middle East conflict, the cost of your groceries, your Amazon packages, and your building materials will double with it. The government cannot print its way out of a physical energy shortage. You cannot digitize a barrel of oil. You have a very brief window right now to front-run the 2026 energy shock. The masses are glued to their screens, completely distracted by the political theater and the kinetic warfare. You need to mute the news and focus purely on the economics of your household. Here's the 2026 execution playbook to insulate yourself from what is coming. Step 1. The commute short. You need to immediately audit your personal exposure to fossil fuel inflation. The math here is going to become brutal very quickly. Let's say you are currently driving a 20 mile per gallon pickup truck or a massive SUV driving 15,000 miles a year. At $3 a gallon, that costs you about $200 a month in fuel. But what happens when the Strait of Hormuz is blocked and gas hits $8 a gallon? Suddenly, you're paying $500 a month just to drive to a job you probably hate. If you have an $800 monthly car payment on top of that, you are looking at a $1,300 monthly liability just for transportation. You're holding the 2026 equivalent of a 1973 muscle car. You're holding a toxic liability that is about to become unfundable. You need to execute the efficiency arbitrage today. Short the commute. Downsize that liability before the market realizes what is happening. Secure a high-efficiency hybrid, buy a reliable 4-cylinder commuter in cash, or eliminate the commute entirely by aggressively negotiating remote work. In 1974, dealerships literally couldn't give away V8 engines because nobody wanted to feed them. Do not be the guy trying to sell a gas guzzler when the panic hits. Sell it now to a dealership while the used car market is still relatively stable before consumer demand violently pivots toward efficiency. Step 2. Supply chain arbitrage, the tax-free yield. When energy prices spike, the global maritime shipping network grinds to a halt. The cost of diesel dictates the price of everything in your local grocery store and hardware store. The modern survival hustle is what I call supply chain arbitrage. The media will try to shame you and call this prepping or hoarding. Ignore them. This is pure, cold, mathematical investing. Think about it like this. If you buy a 6-month supply of non-perishable food, household goods, and necessary medical supplies today for $1,000, and shipping inflation drives the cost of those exact same goods to $2,000 by the end of the year, you just made a 100% return on your money. And the best part, that return is entirely tax-free. You don't pay capital gains taxes on groceries you consume. You're effectively locking in a guaranteed tax-free yield on your cash by avoiding the future price hikes. Furthermore, you need to acquire portable solar generators and high-efficiency chest freezers right now. Storing bulk food is only profitable if you can keep it cold when an overburdened, expensive power grid experiences rolling blackouts. You're building an independent microeconomy inside your own garage. Step 3, high-velocity hard asset rotation. During a geopolitical energy crisis, paper money is guaranteed to lose. To fund the military apparatus and attempt to stimulate a dying domestic economy, the government has only one move: print trillions of dollars out of thin air. This will systematically destroy whatever purchasing power you have left in your fiat savings account. You must rotate your cash into hard assets. But I'm not just talking about buying physical gold or holding Bitcoin in cold storage. Those are stores of value, and they are important. But to actually build wealth during stagflation, you need high-velocity hard assets. These are high-leverage physical tools, raw materials, and components that will skyrocket in price the second global shipping lanes are interrupted. I'm talking about commercial repair equipment, high-end construction tools, copper wire, specialized mechanical parts, and off-grid technology. If the supply chain breaks, the guy who knows how to fix an espresso machine, a commercial HVAC unit, or a broken e-bike, and actually owns the physical replacement parts, has infinite leverage. He dictates the market price. You want to own the physical goods and the tools that society relies on to keep functioning when they can no longer afford to simply order a replacement from overseas. The people who got completely wiped out in the 1970s were the ones who believed the government when politicians went on television and promised the crisis was transitory. They waited in the gas lines, they paid the inflated prices, they trusted the price controls, and they watched their generational wealth evaporate into thin air. The people who won, the ones who built empires in the 1980s, were the ones who saw the geopolitical writing on the wall and positioned their assets before the panic set in. They didn't wait to be told what to do. They recognized the rules of the game had changed, and they adapted instantly. The board is set for 2026. The conflict isn't coming, it is already here. The only question left is whether you're going to be the guy waiting in line at the pump to pay $10 a gallon, or the guy who saw it coming and opted out of the trap entirely.